Hi, this is Nicole Gabay with Area Code 508. I recently had the amazing opportunity to sit down with Richard Dreyfuss and have a conversation. He is the legendary film and stage actor, and many of you may remember him from such movies as Mr. Holland's Opus, from Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Whose Life Is It Anyway, What About Bob? I could go on and on. He's an Academy Award winner and has won many other awards, including Golden Globes. This past summer, he shot the film Lightkeepers on Cape Cod, also starring Blythe Danner. And I had an opportunity to sit down with him and talk about a subject that he is so passionate about and that is near and dear to his heart. And that's the Dreyfuss Initiative, which are his ideas about bringing civics back to the classroom and introducing these themes once again to kids in America. So what follows is my conversation with Richard. Being that civics is so in-depth and there is so much involved as far as bringing that back into either the curriculum, how do you propose, what is your idea in terms of this?
We had our first conference about the subject.
Okay.
And the question was asked, what is it? What is civics?
Yep.
And is it necessary? And if it's necessary, is it urgent? And if it's urgent, what are we doing about it? And the answer is, yes, it's urgent.
Yes.
And yes, we have completely and utterly failed in the fundamental tenet of the United States of America, which is that the future is more important than the past. That's what separated us from any other nation in the world. We are a nation bound only by ideas. We have no common ancestry or religion or caste system or class system. If we don't teach those ideas, they don't exist.
That's, I was going to ask you about those ideas. Now, when you said we're bound by ideas, do you mean by the original thought of ideas and the ability to express them, or do you mean certain American ideals?
I mean, what is known as the Enlightenment was actualized in the Constitution and the Declaration, and the Enlightenment is reason and logic, clarity of thought.
Yeah.
Critical analysis.
Yes.
And we teach none of that to our kids.
And how do you think we can bring that to the curriculum? How do we teach kids to think critically and be able to have civil discourse about that?
Well, first you can layer it in trans-departmentally. It's
Thus throughout a curriculum, not just a class.
Any subject.
Right.
And when a history teacher is teaching history, to know the difference between what's history and what is current affairs, and what is contextual. That you can't talk about, let's say, healthcare or impeachment or war powers or going to war as if it was born fully grown at that moment and it's only about that moment.
Right.
It has a history.
Right.
And that is not taught anymore. You have to learn the concept of context. And the other things, reason and logic, have been taught actually for 3,500 years.
Yeah.
And there are ways known and established to teach that, and to teach not only what dissent is, but to raise it up as something to be devoted to.
Right.
Because we are a nation founded by dissenters.
That's right.
And yet, in our culture, we fire dissenters the moment we see them.
Yes. Isn't that interesting how that happens?
Yeah. If a thing is not, represented, it doesn't exist. It's like the tree that falls in the forest.
Right. Does anyone hear it?
Nobody hears it.
Right.
So reason itself, unless it's exemplified somewhere, in history classes, in science classes, in whatever, does not exist. And the most vivid example of this is civility.
Yes.
Civility is not just antique politeness.
Right.
It's the oxygen that's required by any democracy.
Yes.
And when the norm becomes incivility,
Yeah.
becomes screaming and yelling and
Yes.
patronizing and yelling,
Which we have seen a lot of on television and
which
in
we have
debates.
seen only,
Yeah.
then kids grow up thinking that's the only option.
Right.
When in fact, that's not only wrong, it's wrong at the top of its lungs.
Now, how do you think we would be able to introduce the whole idea of having critical discourse where one person doesn't end up taking it personally and then everything changes? That's what it seems that happens.
Well, when we were on Martha's Vineyard having this conference,
Yeah.
one of the historians was Gordon Wood from Brown University. And he said, I have no stake in a historic issue like slavery. He said, slavery was done and decided on 50 years before I was born. It's the contemporary issues that people have a stake in.
Right.
People may fear, let's say a Democrat may fear that if they go and send their kids to civics
Yes.
classes, they're going to come back Republicans.
That's right.
Or Republicans may fear
very
that they'll
good
come
point.
back Democrats.
That's right.
But in fact,
Yeah.
in order to have a civic society, you've got to teach first the neutral, pre-partisan tools
Yes.
that all citizens must share. And that is something that comes before. If you want to build a Chevy or a Porsche,
Right.
first you got to build an internal combustion engine.
Right.
Then you can make a decision about what kind of
Right,
car.
the
And try to
style
build a
and
Chevy
that.
before
Yeah.
you build the internal combustion engine and
Right.
see how far it's going to get you.
Yeah. So how do we tie this into a modern curriculum where, I don't know, it seems that kids today do only see the here and now in this country? I wonder, is this a cultural problem? Or if I go to Europe or if I go to South America and I have friends over, we all start talking about a political subject and everyone has different opinions, but everyone can still talk about it. That doesn't seem to happen here. Is that because people aren't paying attention? Or do you think it's that it's just not important enough?
I think that when you hear people saying in any way, express a kind of distrust, term limits says that no matter what your life experience is, if you're in Congress for more than 2 terms, you're a crook, get out. And if you're a judge and you're proscribed from sentencing, and that's saying to the judge, we don't trust you. Trust is at the basis of the democracy that we have chosen and built, which is called a republic, a representative democracy.
Right.
And that is built on trust of our representation.
And that seems to waver.
Well, I think that right now there's a 100% agreement that public officials speak inauthentically
Right.
about public issues. Now people are willing to go on the Jerry Springer show and say that they have incest with their sisters in public, so that our private life is public
Right.
and our public life is private,
Yeah.
because officials don't talk about it honestly.
Right.
So everything is standing on its head, and it's not civics that is the cure, but civics is certainly, or education is certainly part of the cure. And when you see young people cynical, cynicism is probably the ugliest characteristic of man.
Sure.
It's like a mule.
Right.
It has no offspring.
Right. It doesn't go forward.
And cynicism is only born in one place, and that's the end of a love affair. And when you break your heart, or when someone breaks your heart, that's when you become cynical. And that's what happened in the United States. We entered...
When did the love affair end?
In the 60s. What happened was that our fathers had beaten the most vivid example of what we did not want, Hitler. And then they came home, job done, to the birth of television,
Right.
which at the beginning had no money for programming. And so they showed old American movies like
Right.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and John Ford films, all of which taught you to love this country. And we went into the 60s with a love affair. And then that love affair turned into a battle, and that battle turned into a separation.
Right.
which, when we got to the 70s,
The heartbreak set in.
The belief
Yeah.
that it was a fraud
Right. Came in.
came in.
Now, what do you think about this theory now that Obama talks about transparency in government? Do you think it works? Do you think young people are paying attention? Do you think it might change largely the cynicism that we've been seeing? Do you think people will come around?
Obama is, on one level, a kind of miracle in politics and an opportunity that is beyond my ability to articulate. However, he's also a politician,
right,
and is quite capable of being smaller than we hope him to be.
He's human, after all.
And that means that he would continue the practices of decay. And we are in decay, and not just in education, but I could point to any section of this culture, entertainment, business. It doesn't take a lot to see any headline that points to the fact that doing good is not
popular. Yeah.
That being responsible and accountable is not popular.
Yeah.
And that selfishness has gone way beyond whatever we thought. The fact is that in the New York Post there was a headline that said, 1 week after the bailouts, it said, mortgage rates go up and foreclosures go up.
Yeah.
They didn't even take a breath.
Yeah, right.
Now the fact is, a democracy in any incarnation, however you decide, sooner or later becomes the agreement to share political space with those with whom you disagree.
Right.
And when you are yelling at the top of your voice and interrupting and patronizing and bullying, you're not sharing anything.
You're not listening. Yeah, you don't have discourse.
You don't have discourse.
Right.
And that's what we have to bring back. And can it be brought back? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it can be brought back literally by an intake of breath and a change of perspective. Because the same teachers can teach through 100 million ways the idea of the other opinion being represented.
Valid, yeah.
Or the concept of dissent being represented and honored.
Yeah.
If you don't honor a dissenter, then you don't know anything about the history of the country.
Right.
And you also have to stop simplifying everything. The media insists that we simplify.
Right, the sound bites and the little headlines.
And the fact is, there are things that are complex and require time.
Very much. Now, that's something else I've heard in some interviews I've heard you talk about, that it seems like the whole concept of time has shifted because of the technology.
Yep.
So how do we either change it or morph with it? Because it is what it is. And I even heard you talking about the synapses in our brain that are suddenly adjusting to this new wave of how we think. So how do we bring back some old concepts back in, mix it into what's new?
Well, let me bring back one really old concept.
Yeah.
We got a gun at our heads that we don't know is at our heads. We've got a gun cocked at our heads. Which is that we have we've developed technologies from nuclear to computer to broadcast, all of which combined together have taken time out of decision making.
Right.
Which means that if you make a mistake, and mankind's history is filled
full of mistakes, we have to have that opportunity too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we don't. There's no fat. And if you are corralled by the wrong people, if you are led down the wrong path, and you are raised to what is called the mass hysteria of crowds.
Right.
The Constitution of the United States was built to protect us from the tyranny of the majority. And most people now think that the Constitution was built to protect us from the tyranny of the minority.
Right.
And in fact, it's just the opposite.
It's right. It's why the country was founded.
We have to give, somehow, intellectually, the same time freedom to think and ruminate that the Atlantic Ocean gave us when we designed the Constitution. If we had tried to do that in Europe, they would have slaughtered us to the last man.
That's right.
So we had the Atlantic Ocean to protect us from them.
Time and distance were on our side.
That means that the computer technology people have to understand that the speed of things is not the most important priority.
Right.
That raising up intelligence is as important or more. That broadcast people have to understand that gridding the whole world with the ability to show the same news in the same nanosecond is unique and has never, ever been done before in 13,000 years.
Right. And it's not necessarily the best way.
And boy, we got to be cautious about it.
Right.
Because when the towers fall, and all we have is grief and sorrow and rage, and we don't know who and what and where.
Right.
If we make a mistake, we can end civilization in a minute.
No, we definitely have the capacity, that's for sure.
And that capacity has never been until now.
Right.
And so people don't realize that what was is not what always will be, and that what is now is different, even if we can't see it.
Yeah.
And that's why I call history a tsunami.
How so?
Because a tsunami is massive changes that are going on underneath our feet invisibly.
Right, below the surface.
And we're not aware of them until they overwhelm us.
Right.
So broadcast technology and computer technology, they don't know that what they've actually done, aside from making secretarial functions sexy.
Right.
Oh, look, you can change that font and put it into that little file cabinet.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Is that they've taken time and thrown it away.
Yeah.
So that no game, no video game, and we have computers, laptops now, that are the equivalent of more than the computer power that took us to the moon.
Right.
No game raises up patience, rumination, contemplation, time to change your mind. And there can be.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for the entrepreneurial genius to figure out the game, and requires you to take time
to think.
To do it.
Yeah. Now, is that, when you mentioned the Enlightenment, and then I had heard another interview where you mentioned about the darkness, that there's a very small window of opportunity where we have this Enlightenment, and then it would be a period of darkness, meaning that we were headed towards that, or that you're just referring to history that way?
No, I'm saying that there's Dreyfus Universal Law number 22.
Yes.
Is that no matter who you are or what you know or what you think you've learned, sooner or later, thinking makes your head hurt, and you fall back on the nearest prejudice. And that's a truth about humanity. And what we did in this country was to respect people enough to say that they were sovereign, they were the ultimate authority. But Jefferson cunningly left out how to do that, how to teach people how to be sovereign. Right. And you've got to teach people how to take responsibility for their nation, how to know who's whispering in my ear, who owns the media. And if one guy owns between, let's say, 35 and 60% of the media, of all English-speaking media.
Yeah.
And isn't that an interesting subject to discuss?
Sure.
And if so, why aren't we?
Right.
And if
There are
Rupert
laws
Murdoch,
about this.
and Rupert Murdoch is the guy that I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that Rupert Murdoch owns as much of the media as he does.
Yeah, isn't there antitrust laws?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't there laws? And that's why the darkness means that we accept the unacceptably stupid. The war on terror is a stupid thing. It neither illuminates, it doesn't tell us who our enemy is,
Right.
it doesn't tell us anything at all.
Put people in a state of fear. It really does. And it perpetuates that.
And it perpetuates the fear only.
Yeah.
It does something to us
Mm-hmm.
that's bad.
Right.
And in the smallest of ways, in my business, for instance, in the newspaper, at least once a week, you'll see a list that says 10 most popular films. And that's the money spent on people going to see movies.
Yeah.
A meaningless list because Gone with the Wind cost $0.25.
Right.
And Terminator cost $12.50.
Yeah.
The real question would be how many tickets sold.
Right.
But they don't give you that.
Right.
And there's no journalist that has stood up and said,
yeah,
I'm not going to publish that crap. I want to know the tickets sold.
Sure.
So
everything's skewed.
Everything. The journalists in the media
reports,
no longer ask the most easily fundamental questions.
Right.
They have forgotten the mandate of journalism, which is to speak truth to power, and to say to the president, I don't work for you, you work for me, answer the damn question.
Right.
And when Helen Thomas was exiled into the back row for doing exactly that, Tim Russert said to me, well, what could we have done? And I said, what could we have done? You didn't have to show up at the next press conference.
True.
And it all would have been over.
Right. Right.
And
people are afraid to make that stand.
And darkness is here. It's not there. It's here. It means that we don't question. We don't understand our own authority. It means that we don't listen to what is valuable in our opposition, and we simplify things beyond reason. Television, for instance, in analyzing the world, removes television from its analyzed society, and you can't because it's right at the center. And television, this
medium right here,
is like crack cocaine. It makes big things small and small things big.
It's true.
You can be watching the resurrection of Christ and TiVo it. Go to the bathroom, have a meal, come back and see the end.
It's true.
And at the same time, if you have a rally of 1,000 people, all of whom agree, but there's one guy with a red nose, the cameras go to the red nose and distort.
And suddenly,
the story.
It's the biggest thing.
And until people realize...
perspective. It's the perspective we see things in.
This thing makes it too easy. And again, our proclivity is to laze about, thinking is tough.
It is, and I agree with what you're saying as far as how do we encourage kids to start to come out of schools thinking.
Well, let's remember this. It's not just civics. We don't teach kids shop.
That's true. Some of the very basic fundamentals.
Sewing, cooking.
Yeah.
And is there anyone here who believes that the 21st century is going to be a Fred Astaire movie or a cakewalk? Or
you still need to sew a button.
That maybe we're going to be in trouble and that the kids aren't being prepared?
Yeah.
I mean, we are letting down the kids at an accelerating rate every day.
Yeah.
And that is specifically un-American.
Well, how do we bring this message that you have so passionately explored and articulated in such a very laser-sharp way, how do we bring that to all different curriculums throughout the country so that everyone gets on the same page and is saying, you know what, we need to bring these fundamentals back and make that happen in a very, in a way that is really thorough, in a way that's true for the country.
One of the things that happened to us is that we became addicted to immediate gratification.
Right.
If you look at the history of the country, we undertook things, the end of which we couldn't see. And this is one of them. This is, first, let's make people aware that there's a problem.
True.
Let's make people aware all over the country that we share one problem, and that is we know nothing anymore about why we're singular or important in history or what gifts we've given to humanity, and we have given some major gifts.
Absolutely.
First, let's acknowledge that, and that takes me speaking and other people speaking.
And the awareness, raising that awareness.
And then once you get people,
Mm-hmm.
kids saying to their parents and parents saying to the superintendents,
Yeah.
we want this,
Yeah.
then the superintendents are more than willing.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken in front of 3,000 supers at one time,
Yeah.
and they all want to do this.
Yeah.
It's just that they think that it's one of those things that if you can't finish it by Tuesday, no one is willing to start.
Right.
Well, sometimes you just start.
You do. You just start. It's absolutely true. And that's something that hopefully, the more that this message comes out, the more that we can see and read about this, and the more that parents become aware of it and make it dinner conversation. I think that's, where this all begins, really. I mean, we love to think that, yes, this happens in the schools too, but a lot of it does happen at home, and how we talk to kids, and what opinions we solicit of theirs, and have them think about things.
Yeah.
I think they need to be asked the questions. Sometimes I feel the questions maybe are just not being asked.
And also, people compartmentalize. They say, I'm in the press, or it's the parents' fault, or
Yeah.
it's the church's. And in fact, a person who is in the media is also a parent and also goes to church.
Right.
And it depends on when the Kodak is snapped.
Right.
And
Right.
what we've got to do is just say to ourselves, wait a minute, we collectively are responsible for the welfare of this nation.
Mm-hmm.
And it says so in the Constitution. We, the people of the United States,
Right.
in order to form a more perfect union,
Right.
establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility,
Mm-hmm.
provide for the common defense,
Mm-hmm.
promote the general welfare, and assure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity.
Mm-hmm. So it's really all of our responsibility, is what you're saying.
Yo, baby.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so perfectly well said. And it's like, gosh, why didn't we all think of that before?
And remember, the Constitution's preamble is all about verbs.
Mm-hmm.
It's an activity.
Right.
America is an activity. America is hard.
Yeah.
America will fail if people don't work at it.
Mm-hmm.
America will fail.
Yeah.
And America is a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone in the world knows it except Americans.
Yeah. It's always amazing. It is amazing. I know I was born in a different country, and I know what it's like to have family members who can't be citizens or who aren't citizens and who wish they were. So, for all of us who are here and who have citizenship and value that and work with that, it is a gift.
It's a gift beyond measure.
Yeah.
And people who never leave don't know that the rest of the world doesn't have what we have.
Exactly.
And that's why when you get back to America, you want to kiss the tarmac.
Yeah, it's very true. I heard you mention something about the constancy of curiosity and constancy of outrage. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
People are going to think
Mm-hmm.
Bush is the villain, Cheney is the villain.
Yeah.
Well, the villain is us,
Mm.
because it was our inability to sustain outrage that allowed them to do what they did. And we have stopped teaching that you have the right to be outraged.
Right.
And television has done its best to distract us.
Yes.
If there's one clue to how powerful we are
Mm-hmm.
as the sovereign authority in this country,
Yeah.
it's how much time and creativity and money is spent distracting us
Very
from
much
that
so.
authority.
That's right. Now, but this seems to be another one of these old-fashioned concepts, that you have the ability to be outraged and to continue to be outraged, but to what end? How does that, because I think in this country so many examples have been set of it turns into violence. So
Well,
where does outrage, where else can
just
outrage go?
insist. A federal judge, a federal prosecutor
Mm-hmm.
came up to me one day at a museum thing. He said that he told me what he did for a living.
Yeah.
And I said, put some bad people in jail. And he said, I will. I said, no, I mean it. I mean, we need heroes and villains.
Yeah.
We need people
Yeah.
to go to jail for stealing billions of dollars on Wall Street.
Absolutely.
And we need people to be named if they keep their bonuses and other people and bonuses of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
They keep their bonuses when other people are losing their houses.
Yeah.
Let's name them
Right.
at least and bring some shame back.
Right.
Let's shame
Yes.
those people.
There's
And
a lot
let's
to be said
put
for that.
bad people who do those things
Yep.
in jail.
Yeah.
And that includes office holders,
Yeah.
Democrats
Yep.
and Republicans.
That's right. There should be no selected officials who get to have special care and things like this.
And the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States believed in what they called executive sovereignty. And when I asked, what is that? They said, oh, that means the President is above the law. And I said, not in this country, pal.
Yeah. No.
The President of the United States is a public servant.
Yeah.
He is not more nor less.
That's right.
And
Are people forgetting that?
well, this was an illegal war without congressional oversight.
Yeah.
And that alone. And when he admitted, President Bush, to breaking the federal wiretap laws,
Yeah.
everyone just ignored it.
I know.
He did what? He broke the law by admitting
It's almost like
federal wiretap.
it was like the sound bite came and went, and they covered it up with some other sound bites, and everyone forgot that other sound bite.
And that's
The problem.
what happened to outrage.
Yeah.
We distracted people
Right.
enough so that they got confused
Yes.
just enough so that there was what was the problem
What-
again? Huh?
What
Talk
was
about
it that
the
happened
dumbing
last
down.
week?
People
Well.
have to demand an answer to certain questions, and that's why having the press be rude and impolite is a necessity, because they're the only ones who really represent us in the government.
And for some reason, that totally stopped. It seemed like it was the opposite. They began pandering to
Well,
whomever.
the moment that CBS Network was owned by a company that owned other companies,
Yeah.
so American Tobacco could call 60 Minutes and say,
Right.
we don't wish to be investigated, that was the end of American journalism.
Yeah.
And people now call it Disney ABC,
Right.
ABC Disney.
Right.
Well, and that would have been laughed at in 1955.
Right. Of course. Of course.
The networks are the networks. News is news. They can't
Entertainment is
have
entertainment, right.
partners. They can't be owned by
Yeah.
special interests.
Yeah. Well, that then becomes a whole nother political activism, I'm sure, for us to really, for citizens to really give their opinions about that.
Citizenship
on
is
it.
not just the act of voting.
No.
Citizenship is daily slogging,
Yep.
daily losing and winning,
Yep.
and constant, and every day you are in there.
Yep.
Some you lose and some you don't.
Yep.
Some you win and some you don't. Some you let your opposition win. If you fight every battle,
Right. You can't possibly
you
go
can't
on.
possibly
Right.
have the energy to go on.
That's right. You were talking about this experiential train journey that you had mentioned a few minutes ago. Is that something that they're planning on instituting? Because that sounds like a wonderful journey that American families would take, should take, and
Well,
especially in summertime.
I
coming.
have been told
Yeah.
by the Constitution Center
Yes.
that they approve of it, but they have yet to write the letter saying it officially. And I've asked that a work group be formed by them
Yes.
to put
Initiate that. Yeah.
the thing together,
Yeah.
and that has not been done.
Okay.
So it's up to the people to write and call
Yeah.
the Constitution Center and say,
And make
we
those
want that
proposals.
journey.
That's right. Another opportunity for activism, and really for education.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what
Absolutely.
a waste the Constitution Center would be if it didn't do anything except applaud itself
Oh,
for
yeah.
having a constitution.
Well, of course, we got to bring people to see it, bring people to know about it, and be aware of
and
it.
make sure that it's held up and effort is made to maintain it.
Yes.
It's got principles involved, and people are out to take those principles away
Yeah.
and put fear in their place, and put the fear of social approbation. And I don't want to raise my head above and get shot at.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
that's not what America is all about.
No, it's not. And that's a very good point. And hopefully, we'll all keep talking to each other and raising awareness. And I guess that's the way it has to be. For now, it's one person at a time speaking from, from their heart, with their families, with their school boards, and slowly and surely pushing through each community one by one is probably the best way it's going to be brought to the surface.
You can say, kids hate to say this, but you ask a question and kids hate to say, I don't know. But I don't know is the beginning of learning.
Absolutely.
And learning is the only ability to get to wisdom.
Yes.
So saying I don't know is actually a liberating experience.
Yes.
And learning can be the most exciting part of your day.
Now, why are kids not saying I don't know? What's wrong with that?
Because they think they're going to be made fun of. And they think, in all cultures, in all civilizations, kids, or most people, don't want to admit they don't know something, which of course means that they have to pretend to know everything.
Well, then they're right there. They stop the furthering of learning and curiosity and asking questions, and somehow that has become unpopular.
And somehow that's also the norm.
Yeah, yeah. And that this is the time that we want to be opening up all these questions for everyone to ask. Thank you. I think you do. Thank you, Richard.
Clearly, there are some major changes that need to be made in order for us to not lose our history. Yes, we need to stay competitive with the rest of the world, but we need to maintain the spirit in which America was built. The Dreyfus Initiative is a way for us to bring this back to the awareness of all the kids and parents. If you have kids in school, talk to your principals, talk to your superintendents. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have today. Thank you very much for joining us. From all of us at Area Code 508, have a great day.